Hi everyone, this is the last webcast for week 11, webcast 6, and the final webcast of the week is going to be focused on paragraph rules. Like Path on a Type, paragraph rules are really fun, but unlike Type on a Path, I actually use these constantly in my work. They are so versatile and they are so helpful when you are editing text. And I'm going to give you a quick demonstration as to why this is such a valuable feature at our disposal. I have this finished lab, which I'm sure at this point you're tired of seeing over and over again, that I keep referring back to. But this rule that you see going across the page is not a graphic, and neither are any of these other rules that you see. In fact, this rule, which looks like a gray rule behind text, is in fact created from a paragraph rule. So what differentiates a rule, which is another name for a line, from a paragraph rule? The difference is that a paragraph rule is a line that is glued to the text. And we don't draw it, we create it from a set of attributes in a dialog box. And you might wonder, why would you go to all that trouble? And I'm going to go back to this file, which has some of the same attributes, but it's missing quite a few of the rules. And let me show you why we don't like drawing rules when we're dealing with text. Let's say that I want to draw a rule that's going to go across the top of this heading. Every time we have a heading 1, I want it to be, let's say, whoops, wrong one here. Let's say I want it to be 3 points. I want it to be, say, 70% black. And I go into preview, and that looks pretty good. That's the effect I want. But here's where it all goes to pieces. I'm working on the document. So an editor comes in and says, oh, by the way, we forgot one of our sentences. And now the text is being pushed down the page, but what's not moving? That rule is not moving. And this is a real problem. I do not want to go through an entire document and adjust every single rule that is attached to a particular set of characters. And obviously a decade ago, this is what we had to do, and we would try to group things. We wouldn't use rules a lot because we knew that to catch things up later on, after modifications, was going to take a tremendous amount of production time. So everyone was pretty excited when we had the option to add a rule using something that would attach it to the text. InDesign also has an anchored frame feature, and we could use it we could accomplish a very similar thing by using the anchored frame feature, but paragraph rules are so fast and so consistent. You're going to just love this feature, I promise, when we get through it. Rules that we attach to text do lots of things for us. They help us define sections of text. As I just mentioned, unlike drawn separately, we can have them move with the text as it goes down. We can also add rules to paragraph styles so that they are applied automatically when you apply the paragraph style. That's the type of rule I would like you to create when you are working on Lab 10. So listen carefully, because you're going to need to do this. You're not going to have to create the rules exactly as I did in this finished example that you're going to receive in Lab 10. But you are going to have to come up with some sort of a paragraph rule. And if you can come up with 2, that would be even better. All right. It is a paragraph attribute. And just like any other paragraph attribute, and you've heard me say this over and over again, you need only have your cursor blinking in that paragraph. If I go to my Paragraph Styles panel and I right-click and choose Edit H1 Heading, we have a Paragraph Rules divider here, little topic, just like any of the others. I've got tabs, keep options, hyphenation. We've seen several of these. But here's the dialog box that's going to allow us to create a rule. Another way to go about this is to add it by example and then redefine the style to incorporate that rule. And that's what I'm going to do here. I want to give you a couple of options. With my cursor in the same text, I'm going to go up to my Control Panel menu, and we also have the command here. This is going to be added as a local override, but I can incorporate it into my paragraph style, as you know from the Paragraph Styles webcast, by redefining my style to incorporate this override. One thing that I had a little bit of difficulty getting used to when I first started using paragraph rules is when you first go in, you see either rule below or rule above. And you notice that there's a drop-down menu. And so I originally thought, oh, I can only have one. I can't have one above and below. No, that's not the case. The case is that you have to turn them on separately because the dialog box is only going to give you the attributes for one at a time. But you can do this twice, one for rule below and one for rule above. Let's just create a rule above. Selecting rule above did not add that rule. I have to turn that attribute on. So I'm turning the feature for paragraph rules on, and we see a default rule appear. Now, normally the default rule is a one-point rule. It's black. It's 100%. But because I've already created a rule in this document, it's just going back to the last attributes that I have placed. So I'm just going to take it back to what would normally have been the default. And let's just start working through these attributes. The weight refers to the weight of the line. And we're all used to that when we talk about a stroke weight. If I increase that width, that stroke is going to increase exactly the amount that I've indicated. I'm going to bring this back to a 2. The type of rule is going to be whatever strokes you have in your strokes panel. So if you've created any custom dash strokes, they're going to be down here below this horizontal line, but I can have Japanese dots. I could have a thin thick. If I was to do that, I would probably want to thicken this up, which is obviously way too thick. I could have hash marks, wavy lines, whatever you think is appropriate for the documentation that you're doing. Now moving down, we also have the option of designating a different color for that stroke. Normally the default is text color. So whatever the text color is, that's going to be the color of the stroke. But you can change that. Any color you have in your swatches panel will appear in this drop-down menu. So I could have black text and I could choose to do red dots above. And I can also change the tint of that rule and also the gap color, which I can specify here. Currently this rule has none in between the dots, but I could change that to have it be a blue, or how about a yellow? So this is going to work with any rule that has some sort of a dash pattern, and dots are similar to a dash pattern where they have gaps. The other fun thing here is to adjust how this rule is going to be placed in relation to the text itself. Do I want it the width of my column, which is going to go from the left margin to the right margin? Or do I want it the width of my text? And if that text changes, the rule will change. And I'll show you that in just a moment. And we'll come back into this to modify it as well. The offset is a real important piece of this because it's going to determine how close that rule is to the type. And none of us know off the top of our head what that should be. So we have to play with this a little bit. Everything grows from the baseline. A rule below and a rule above, a rule below and a rule above always starts at the baseline. So I'm already at 1p7 because that's 1 pike is 7 points from the baseline. What I tend to do is, this is just a little trick that I use. I click on the word offset. It highlights the number. And I just use my up and down arrow keys until I'm happy with the position of that rule. And then I look at the number, and that's what I've got. If you are choosing the width of text, sometimes I feel that there's an optical illusion and that the width of the text makes the rule look slightly shorter than the last character. You're allowed to modify that with your left and your right indent. I could say no matter how wide this text is, I want you to go in a negative direction back towards the right edge, maybe 3 or 4 points, so that it extends just slightly over that last character. And I also have the option of changing the left indent as well. Keeping in frame usually has to do with the first rule on a page. By default, it's going to pop up out of that text frame, and this checkbox will keep it in. Now, let me go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to change the amount of text in this heading. And look at how that rule grows. Pretty cool. All right, I'm going to go back to my paragraph rule, and I'm going to add a rule below. It's going to keep the current rule above, and now when I turn it on below, notice I get an entirely separate rule below this. And these are the defaults typically. As I said, 1 point, text color, it's just going to be a regular, straight, flat rule. Usually gap color is none, the width of the column, and there's no offset, right indent or left indent. You can make those modifications. I'm going to turn that off because that looks probably pretty bad. To go back and edit my rule above, I'm going to choose it from the drop-down menu. I've decided that I just want this to be a black rule, maybe 60%. I do not want a gap color. And I would like this to be Japanese dots so that they're a little bit smaller. And I'm going to bring that down to about a 3 point. And maybe I'm going to move this slightly higher. Click OK. Now if I want to incorporate this style into my heading 1 style, I can go to my paragraph panel, right click with my cursor in the paragraph that has the local override, and that plus sign is telling me that. I'm going to right click, say redefine style, and now if I click on a paragraph and make it a heading 1, it will have that applied to it. I'm going to turn these back to heading 2s because I have something else in mind for the heading 2s. And I'll give you a hint about what that's going to be by looking at my formatted text. You can create this effect of a reversed out text rule by creating either 1 or 2 rules and pushing them together, or making one big thick one as I did in this case, and then adjusting it so that it's going to sit behind the size type that you have designated for this type of heading. So let's go do that from scratch, because this is a really popular way that people like to use paragraph rules. I'm going to click in my heading 2, go to paragraph rule, and I want a rule above. It doesn't matter. It could be a rule below or a rule above. I want to make this a solid rule. I'm going to increase the width until I know that I have a rule that's about the height of that text. But it's really hard for me to judge it because it's too high up. So I'm going to move that offset down by clicking on the word offset, using my down arrow key. And I want to be sure I cover that descender. So I want a little bit of extra space below the bottom descender. And I see that it's too short. So I'm going to have to increase the size of that type. Maybe that's about right. And I notice that that left edge is coming too close. So we're going to have to fix that going forward. I could choose to make this a color background, which people often do for different purposes in a document. I could have created this using something like Japanese dots and then giving it a gap color so that it came across. But it's very busy. I'm having a really hard time seeing the text, so maybe I want to bring that tint way down to something like 20%. And maybe I want to change that gap color. Also, I could change that to lighten it by choosing a different gap color from my swatches panel. I'm not going to do that at the moment. We're going to just go with the same plain, boring rule. But I am going to make this a lighter color. If you're going to keep your type black, you're going to make sure that that background is light enough that you're going to be able to clearly read the text. If you want the text to reverse out, which means you're going to make the type white, then you'll need to make it dark enough that the white type will show through. So maybe I need to go as high as 60 or 70%. When I click OK, and I've made that right indent extend, and I'm going to make it go a little bit further because I'm going to push this text over, and I'll show you how I do that. Now I'm going to highlight this type and give it paper as the color. And now I have this reversed out type, and as long as that background's dark enough, you're not going to hinder people's readability. I still have this problem on that left edge. Can you see how that's just too close? So I'm going to give this paragraph an indent, a left indent, go over to the right just a little bit, but my rule came with it because the rule is designated to have the same left indent as the type. So now that I've given it an indent of 3 points, maybe I want to go 4, I'm going to go back to the paragraph rule. And I'm going to give it a left indent of -4, the exact amount that I gave the positive indent so that its left edge aligns with that left margin, but I have this nice gap over here on the left. And I'm going to check to see if I feel there's an equal amount of distance on the left and the right. I see, well, maybe I overestimated, gave a little bit too much on the right-hand side. So I'm going to change that indent back just a little. And though it probably makes sense to mathematically have it 4 points and 4 points, I'm going to give this one a little extra room. I'm going to give it 1 point. So it's -4 on the left, -5 on the right. Remember, the reason it's negative is we're going back towards the 0 point on the left and the far right margin on the right. All right. Click OK. I'm going to zoom out. Now all of these paragraphs, character style, attributes, next style, are all level 2 headings. So I'm going to go back to my paragraph styles. I can see I have that modification plus sign. I'm going to right click, choose redefine, and boom. All the other ones adjusted immediately. And notice the difference in the width because I've told it that I want it to be -3 points to the right of the far right character. Pretty cool. I absolutely love this feature. I've used it for so much technical documentation, and there are some really fun creative things you can do with things that aren't technical and boring. I'm sure a lot of you, I've seen you already using strokes in a really creative way in your last lab. So now just turn it into a stroke that's going to be glued to some type so that you have that flexibility that if somebody changes a paragraph, watch what happens now. Oops, too far, sorry. I hit return. And notice that those rules are moving right with the type. I don't have to worry if someone inserts a paragraph, a page, 10 pages, or 80 pages. Those are going to stay exactly where they were designed to be. All right, practice this, have some fun. There's, as I said, there's lots of things you can do with this, and I can't wait to see how you're going to use these in Lab 10. Have a good rest of the week. Until next time, signing off.